at this point. Okay, so Sakib, thank you for your presentation. So now I'm going to turn the stage to you to run this Q&A session.
Yeah, and I think I want to keep it very, very informal. There is no real agenda. It's you guys heard me talk about certain things, so any questions you may have, I just want to open up the floor. There may be banter and leg pulling and some nice conversation and maybe some answers to your questions. And I was talking to Raj and I said, don't be shy to chime in. So he'll obviously, I'm sure he'll also provide you with some wisdom. So the stage is yours, not mine. Like, ask away, and I'll give you my opinions. Basically, that's what we'll do. We'll give you our opinions, and then, of course, you have to take everything with a grain of salt and see what your situation is like. But generally, all over the world, it's the principles remain the same. So. Let's start with, I don't know, pick somebody, whomever wants to go first. Ari, you go first.
I guess I was curious to know, this is a question to Raj. What were some of your failures?
Oh,
there you go.
My failures, man, occur all the time. Sakib knows all about those.
The biggest failure is teaming up with me.
I think that's Sakib's biggest failure. No, I think, to me, I think life is more of a string of failures than successes. I think it's in your head how you think of those. And, when you're talking about, your career, so I'm probably going to pull some examples from my career. At a fairly young age, I set out to set up a consultancy. I think it was only 33 or 34 at that point, with 8 to 10 years of experience. So a lot of people told me that, hey, look, you just don't really have the experience at this point to do that. And then what I realized with that was that they were correct, because even when you do have a lot of experience, it is very challenging to establish a consulting firm from scratch. You need a lot of support. But then if I just sort of like hone in on, let's say, one example, it is, let's say, just bringing in work. And what I found was that out of 100 doors that I knocked on, about 99 of them would close on you, right? So you just had to get used to that mode of operation. And even when you became successful, that almost never changes. Then, out of the 100 doors that you knock on, probably 80 close on you, right? But that's just percentages, right? Still, if you look at those as failures, then you'd think that I'm just a complete failure all the time. So what I tell myself is that whatever happens for good, right? And that's how you should internalize it, as Sakib was saying, that if you can just turn everything into a positive. And sometimes, you're trying for a certain thing to work out, and what you'll find is that you find success in something else that you actually weren't putting in a lot of effort at, right? So I think it's just one of those things where if you have that belief that sooner or later things will work out, you just approach things in a fairly planned and methodical manner, and the life usually has a way of just working itself out. So I don't really think too much about what's going to happen in the future or try to micromanage situations. Perhaps the most frustrating things for me are for my personal life, and you might find this quite trivial, but I've picked up playing cricket over the last 3 years. I mean, I grew up in India, so anybody from that part of the world would know that, growing up, especially as a young boy, there's two things you wanted to do, either go and join Bollywood, right, become an actor, or become a cricket star, right? So I did pick up cricket when I was younger. I played till grade 8 or 9, but then I realized that there's just a lot of people to compete with, and chances of me succeeding and making it to the top are pretty low. So I decided to focus on my other skills, which was, math and physics and that sort of thing. So then I just gave it up and never played cricket for many, many years, except just backyard tennis ball cricket with my boys. Sorry, this is becoming a bit too long, but
That's okay.
So 3 years ago, when I picked it up, for those of you who don't know cricket, right, this is playing in the league with a leather ball, right, and all the cricket gear and everything. And the reason I did that is because my older one got to a level where he could play in the senior league. So I thought, okay, well, it'd be great if I can play alongside with him. His name is Jay, by the way. He's 15 years old now. So, and I thought, okay, how hard can this be? I used to play back in grade 8 and 9, and I was pretty reasonable, so I should be able to pick it up. And I did play some backyard cricket. Man, I've been really struggling over the past 3 years, and I don't want to call it age because, I still want to think that I have hope. But I have progressively improved over the last 3 years. But every time you go and play, and there is a failure because it doesn't quite match up to what you're thinking in your head, this is the one thing that really frustrates me, right? And there are times when after a failed innings, I come back and say, this is the last one, I'm never going to play again, right? But then there is something in me, within a few hours, I'm back to it, right? And so I think this feeling of frustration after a setback is pretty natural, but I think in your head, you just have to, if there's something you want to do, just be persistent, continue with it. And if I'm honest to myself and I look at my average, sorry, Sak, I'm just about to end, over the last 3 years, my son reminds me of my younger one because he's sort of like a statistician, right? Just a photographic memory with this kid. But he says, Dad, in the first season, your average was 9. And that's the number of runs per innings, right? Second season, your average was 15. The third season, it was close to 20. And then this was sort of like an informal season. But if I did my average, it's about 40. So I have been going up. It's just that my bar keeps on going up higher and higher. And I feel like I'm pretty much at the same level. But overall, I have improved quite a bit, right? So I should bring the same thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, that just really translates over to your career and your life in general. Is you will feel that frustration. You will feel, and invariably when you have a target and you're trying to get somewhere, there will be obstacles. There will be hindrances, but you cannot let them get in the way. You either have to scale them, or I was saying, like, there are certain situations where sometimes you have to go around them. But the whole idea is that you have to keep carving your way forward.
Mm-hmm. I guess maybe, Sakib, you could talk about one of our recent setbacks. I guess people are more interested in, more of a concrete example, if you will. So me and Sakib, we set out with Spanovation in October of 2019, and we were both working with a very successful firm, multidiscipline transportation engineering firm that's pretty large, and had good positions within that firm. But then we decided, for whatever reasons, to set up our own firm. And then as soon as we did that, and we weren't planning on this eventuality, but then our previous employer decided to invoke the non-compete agreements that I had with them, which was a bit of a surprise for us. But you could think of that as a major setback, because what that meant was, for an entire year, we could not practice consulting. So imagine, two of us setting out with our own personal funding to set up a consultancy, and all of a sudden you get hit by that. But it literally took us, 3 hours, Sakib, to say, okay.
It took us about an afternoon, and we decided that we were going to, shut down our consultancy, but we were going to focus on other areas. So, our plan was to have a bit of our tripod in our firm. Our stool was going to have 3 legs. One was going to be research and development. The other one was going to be this whole teaching endeavor that Raj and I equally are passionate about. And the third one was going to be consultancy. So we thought about it quickly, and we said, okay, it's 1 year, and they have chosen to exercise this right, which is their right. So great. They've decided to do that. We will switch gears, and where we were going to do more on the on the consultation side, we're now going to do more on the research and development and the school. So that's where the courses and all that stuff kind of took center stage. And the year did go by, and now we're back at it. And if you think about it, a lot of people could have taken it as a bit of a maybe in a personal sense, but I don't ever think that that's the right way to do it. You just roll with the punches. you see what life has thrown at you, and you try to do the best with. You may not have been dealt the best hand, but it's the hand you've got, and you've got to play the cards right. So whatever cards you're holding are the ones that you have. So there is no point in saying, God, like, this destiny or whatever, like, I have been ruined and all that, you just have the cards that you're holding and you play the best with the cards that you've been given. So we decided very quickly that a year was going to go by eventually. That does not mean that we did not feel the pinch and the heat. I mean, we've both got families and stuff, and we could not work. We could not even solicit work. We could not talk to anyone about it because it was a non-compete, non-solicit. Great, but we found our way through the year. We found an endeavor that kept us focused on doing something productive. And that ended in early October. October the 4th was the last day. And now we're starting to get back into the consulting side of things. So that, if you think about it, from that point of view, you would say that's a major failure. You guys have made the wrong choice. All of a sudden, you're slapped with this letter, and gosh, what are you going to do? But hey, we found a way, and I think this whole way of thinking that Raj and I have developed over the years, and that's what we're trying to get to you guys, is develop that as early in your careers as possible. Then when you get hit by a big wave, you're able to stand your ground a little bit better or swim through it a little bit better.
Yeah. So I think the two things that I would say is resilience and persistence, right? And then taking life lightly, right? I do believe that the more lightly you take life, at the end of the day, everything just quite works out. The more you stress out about things, or how this is going to happen or that going to happen, right? The more fearful thoughts you bring into your thinking, the more challenging it becomes.
Honestly, and I think before I ask the next person to maybe ask a question, I'd just give you an example. Like back when I got laid off in 2001 and I was laid off for 9 months, I was very frustrated, right? But you could think of this last 1 year as being the same or worse, having a family and 2 kids and thinking, how I'm going to feed them, and much less so. Maybe it's a little bit of age and a bit of experience, but also I know that if I had not worked on myself internally and mentally, I would not have been able to deal with this as well as we collectively did. I don't, of course, we did it as a team, but it was a marked difference in my head as to how we dealt with things. I dealt with things back in 2001 and now in 2020. So maybe, Osman, you can ask a question. What's on your mind?
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. As I hail from Pakistan, meaning under the developing country, from developing countries, where the things are very typical. So from the structure, my question is from a structural point of view, where we have a very little chance to border our practices. Like we are still here in a simply supported bridges. We are stuck to a simply supported bridge. How can, in this scenario, in this underdeveloping countries, how can I develop my skills? Like I am studying performance-based design. I am studying continuous span. I am studying right now and at academic level segmented bridge. But I am not implementing this thing in the real life. I have not a real hand experience. So how can I improve myself in it?
Yeah, so that's a very good question, and having come from the same part of the world, I can totally empathize, and I think maybe Raj can also speak to this a little bit. He's also got a lot of experience this way, but I think you are on the right track, because this is what I mean by saying you deal with the situation as best as you can. Now, is it to say that the opportunity will never arrive? I don't think so. I think there is an opportunity for you in the future. Either Pakistan will change its practices because things are happening in that part of the world, or you might decide to leave the country and go somewhere else. But here's the bottom line. If you do not develop the skill set that you are diligently doing, if the opportunities do come along, you will not be able to cash in on those opportunities. You see what I'm saying? So, when I was starting out my career, and I only worked for about a year in Pakistan, so most of my practice, pretty much all of it, is in Canada. But I was told a lot when I got laid off the first time around. I kind of had a similar situation, even though I was in the developed part of the world. It was just a little bit different, but the whole thing was, you have not done much design. You've only done a little bit of analysis over a year. And so we cannot give you work. And for 9 months, I went around in circles and started talking to buildings companies. And they said, well, you have no building experience whatsoever. So the situation was kind of similar in that even though I was here, I was not given an opportunity for a long time. And I had to go find a different job, which I didn't think was my dream job. And I didn't think that I was going to grow as fast as I would, where, say, for example, at the employer that I was at. But what I started doing was, what you're doing is called creating leverage. What you're doing right now is going to stand you apart from the rest of the crowd. And just somehow, and I don't know how, that part I can't answer. When you're ready for the opportunity somehow arrives. It does show up. So when I came here, I didn't know anything about seismic. But coming to UBC, it was all about seismic, and I was lost for the first 6 months. I was like, what are they even talking about? And then I got a real interest in it, and then no job and all of that. But then I started to do all these little things on the side, and then over the years, the opportunities started to show up. So your hand went up. So you want to add something, I guess.
No, I was adjusting the headphone. Sorry.
Okay. So I guess what I'm saying is you are doing the right thing. This is the best you can do right now. Now, of course, if there aren't any segmental bridges happening over there, or there aren't any continuous spans or cable stayed bridges, then the opportunity is not there right now. But you're preparing yourself. I also see Raj's hand going up. So Raj.
Yeah, so I just wanted to add a little bit to this discussion. So I don't truly believe that in Pakistan you don't have situations where you don't need a multi-span bridge or you don't need a longer span bridge at all. I think there is lots of rivers, we know that, and mountainous areas in Pakistan. So for sure you can't bridge every obstacle just with a single span, correct, Usman? So
he's talking about simply supported spans. Even though there are multiple spans, they're usually simply supported.
It's the market that dictates the structural type. So the reason they're doing simply supported spans is because that is overall ending up being the most cost-effective and the most practical solution. Yeah. That's really how it's working out, right? So you can't really force, let's say, a more complex structural system if it's not going to prove out to be more cost-effective. That's how it truly works, right? Sometimes what happens is that what may be more cost-effective in a certain part of the world, in another part of the world, it doesn't equate to the same level of economy, just because the contractors are so used to building a certain way that, one example is that in California, they do a lot of these cast-in-place superstructures on false work, and contractors are used to that technology. Whereas, we look at that in BC and we go like, why the hell would you want to do that? Because that never works out to be the most cost-effective solution, So that sort of thing. But I think what I would encourage you to do is, I'm sure there is outfits in Pakistan that are involved with some of the more complex structural types, because I'm pretty sure, just like in India, there is structures across rivers, there's bridges across valleys, or spans, either mental type, extrados, or even cable stayed. So you should be striving to perhaps get an opportunity with those firms who are working on those projects. Is something that I can think of, right?
I'll give you one example. Recently, they've done a number of really curved steel bridges, and there's steel boxes, going to Fort Monroe.
Southern Punjab.
Yeah, from Punjab to Balochistan, and those were done by the help of the Japanese. But I think those are the type of outfits. And then they also did the Naluchi Bridge in the Kashmir region in Muzaffarabad. So I think the opportunities may be a little bit limited, but the first step would be to learn these things as best as you can on your own, and then start to look for these kind of outfits. And when you create this sort of leverage, when you can tell them, look, I've taken this course, or I've done this self-study, or whatever, I am, ahead of the pack. It gives you a bit of a better opportunity. Remember what Galileo said? He said, give me a lever and I can move the earth, right? So it's very, very true in our personal lives. The more you set yourself apart, the more leverage you create for yourself. Given the circumstances, you'll be better suited. And then at some point, the opportunities start to knock at your door. It does take a little bit of time. So stay in there, hang in there, and keep doing what you're doing. You're doing the right thing. That's the best you can do. But also scan the environment to see what is out there. Don't just think, oh, I'm in Peshawar and this is it, right? Like, expand your thinking process and see there may be other opportunities out there.
So as a life example, as Saqib mentioned, you might have to sort of go out of Peshawar and go to other areas. I used to work in Florida. That was actually my first job in the US. I graduated from University of Massachusetts with a master's, and then probably put out 500 applications and got only 2 interview calls. And one of them was with URS and their group in Tampa. And they had a small group that dealt with cable stayed bridges over there. So I got an opportunity with them. And in those days, I was fascinated by cable stayed bridges. So I worked for 4 years with a brilliant engineer and mentored underneath him for 4 years. But then I was on a work visa, and don't want to get into details of that, but it came down to this, that if I wanted to continue staying in Tampa, at that point I had a wife and a baby on the way. We had just bought our first house. Then there were no opportunities available to continue working on long span bridges. Okay, so that's something I wanted to continue my training in, or my development in. So pretty much one evening I talked to my wife. Our baby was just about to arrive, and we had just invested in a property that we were living in at that point. And I said, look, I'm not happy going to this other firm in Tampa because I would not be working on long span bridges. So she said, well, then why are we restricting ourselves to Tampa? Why don't we move to wherever they are, wherever you get these opportunities? And she says, even if that means that we have to move to Africa, we'll move to Africa. So she went to the computer and searched the name of a firm for me in Vancouver, Canada, Buckland and Taylor. And she said, well, what about this firm? And at that point, I was just so much into numbers that I wasn't even aware of what other firms existed, right? So next day I went and talked to my boss, and I told him, hey, look, there is this firm in Vancouver. Seems like they're looking for an engineer. At least they advertise for a position on their website. What do you think? He's like, oh, I think that these are one of the top 3 guys for long span bridge design in North America. So I put in my application, and luckily I ended up getting a job, and we moved to Vancouver, right? We sold the house, which turned out to be a good thing, because we actually made a profit out of this in 6 months. My wife, with the baby, she went to India for 6 months. I settled in Vancouver. She moved over. And so sometimes you will have to make these sort of moves where if you're chasing something, it will not come to you automatically. You might have to just get up and go to it, right? Did that sort of give you some kind of guidance?
I'm very satisfied with it.
Good.
Yeah. So just don't limit yourself. These days the world is your canvas, right? So just look for opportunities, and sometimes you might have to just pack up and leave, right? To pursue your dreams.
Yes.
Yeah.
I agree.
All right.
Yes,
Thanks
agreed,
so
sir.
much, Raj and Saqib, for sharing your experiences with us. It's really motivating. And being a fresh graduate, it's really nice to have somebody experienced talk to you about different experiences in their life. And it's really great. Thanks so much. And I'd like to ask you about work-life balance. This is the word I heard a lot since I graduated, but I never could really talk to somebody on how to achieve this, because once I start on a project or something, I'm totally into it, and then coming out of it gets really hard for me. So I'd like you to talk about that.
To me, what I think is a choice. It's a choice that you make, and and if you give it priority, right, it will happen. So Sakib knows that about me, and perhaps a lot of other people who worked with me know that I really enjoy things that I do in terms of work, and you've got to put in the effort as far as that is concerned. But at the same time, if you don't give priority to other things, for me, as an example, my kids, cricket, my wife, you know, well, the thing is that I keep it, you can't do everything. We're not, at least I'm not Superman, right? But then at any given point in your life, you sort of give a priority to what are the things that you'd like to do. There is still a few things that I'd like to do, but I can't get to them. And that's fine, right? But then, there's a few extracurricular things that I have. I'm a bit into fitness, not a nut, right? But I want to make sure that I get at least 3 to 4 workouts in the week, whether it is running in a certain phase or maybe some home workouts. Cricket training is a must for me. And then spending some time with the boys, spending time with the wife, maybe going out once a week. So if you make a commitment to that, then you make it happen because that is a priority, even over and above your work, So you just have to, it's a choice, and you make a commitment to that and you make it happen. Well, that's how I do it. And then the other thing is that just the way I operate, I sort of keep things flexible. I work in spurts. There is certain times I know that I'm more efficient. And to me, it's not a measure in terms of how many hours you put in. A lot of the firms out there, they measure work in terms of how many hours you put in. And I think the culture sort of becomes this way where, working hard is rewarded more than creating value, right? Anyways, my thinking is that, you might be able to create a lot of value working just 6 hours in the day instead of 10, 12 hours, right? And everybody's different. Everybody's got a different mindset as far as that is concerned. But I think we need to break that sort of like this inherent assumption that, okay, only if you put in 10 or 12 hours per day, you're really working hard and achieving something in life, because I think if you really find a bit of a flow, you can achieve more with lesser effort, right? It's the lever rule principle, right? But why can't that apply to, our profession and our personal lives also? So I kind of like strive for that also, that sort of thinking that it's not just proportional to a lot of sweat and toil with everything that I do, right? If that makes any sense. But Zach, if you want to add something to this?
Well, I honestly, the work-life balance for me is a tougher thing to achieve. Right now, I have 2 little boys. One is 3 years old and one is 3 months old. So it's I have to give some time to them. I'm finding less time for myself, but I know the first few years. Raj and I are close in age, but in terms of the kids and all that, the family. We're kind of far apart because his kids are pretty much, they're teenagers now, whereas mine are, but one is an infant and one is a toddler. So
you have the wrong role model, Sakib.
Yeah.
Since he grew up in Pakistan, his role model is Imran Khan, so they marry.
Yeah, he's been disappointing me lately, so I don't.
No, he's a role model.
We'll leave politics out of this.
Leave politics out of it, but just as a person, everybody,
Yeah, so what I do a few things. I used to play squash fairly regularly. It's just that with this COVID-19 and having an older father who's in his 80s and then little kids, I've decided to not go into confined spaces or closed spaces as much as possible. So that's taken a bit of a hit. And then with the newborn, I honestly don't have time. So what I do is I listen to music, and reading poetry is a passion of mine. It's been for a long time. So the days that I'm really stressed, I have books, or now everything is available online. So I go and read Urdu poetry or whatever. That's one of my things that I've been into ever since I was in grade 8 or grade 9. So I need to do a bit more in terms of work-life balance, but I try the best as I can. Arbaz, did you want to say something? And then I think we'll follow up again with people and see if there are more questions.
Thank you, both of them. Today's session was really insightful. I have questions to both of them. First question, I mean, like today's about today's session. To what extent do we have to extend our failure? Like, what is the end point to our failure? If we start an event, so what should be our end point? What should I tell that? Yeah, this is not my cup of tea, and I have to go for another. So what that should be? And to the Raj, I mean, I just want to compare the market, like Indian market with the Canadian market. How which market is the best one, and are there any opportunity for a structural engineer there in Canada? I mean, can you please throw some light on those things?
Right.
Yeah. Good questions and tough. The first one's a tough one. when you give up, right? With cricket, I don't think I'm going to give up. Despite all the odds being stacked against me, right? Including people telling me, Raj, your reflexes might be slowing down. I'm like, forget it. Despite biology and physics and whatever, I'm going to go after it. I don't think you should take the same attitude with everything else. So that's being stubborn, right? And perhaps, sometimes being stubborn gets you there, right? Also, I tend to think that, unless you're like really emotional about a certain thing, that I just want that at no matter what cost, right? I think you kind of like try a certain thing maybe one or two times, and if it's not quite, and talking about more about business, right? Let's say if I'm pursuing projects and there is a certain type of opportunity that I want to go after, I try a couple of times and I realize what the effort versus reward ratio on that one is, and if it's not equitable compared to the other opportunities, then I sort of move and go in another direction. I don't tend to get very stubborn, especially in my career, is how I take it. Now, I'm giving you a very general sort of a response, because unless there is a specific situation you bring up, it's going to be hard to address that, right? I do believe, though, that everybody has a bit of a flow. I talk about this flow thing. I call it the path of least resistance, and everybody has their own individual flow. So what you'll find is that there's certain things that you try pretty hard because you're emotional for them, and there's just roadblocks that come your way, right? And there's certain other things that just happen. You put in a little bit of effort and you go a lot further. It's almost as if you're swimming in the direction of the stream. You know what I'm saying? Like you almost feel like you're not fighting the current, you're getting carried with it, right? So I think that's just something that you need to be mindful of within your lives and see that which is the direction in which the stream is flowing. And if I put in a bit of effort in that direction, it just seems to carry me a lot further. So try to find that. It's a bit of a, I know it's not a very discrete answer.
Yeah, this is a tough one.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to, and I think at least because the question is very broad, I want to at least kind of discretize it and differentiate between two things. So, for example, if I say I'm going to achieve this level of education, or I'm going to do this type of, I want to have this type of work experience, I don't think that I would give up on that sort of thing. I would go all in, and I would. So one example from my side, which even I find it amusing at times that I'm doing it, but when I finished my master's, my parents were coming over and I had to support myself. So I went and found a job. I talked to my prof, and he also gave me good advice. He said, look, you can do your, I wanted to do a PhD. Okay. I always wanted to do a PhD. I was like, okay, there's just no frigging way that I will not do a PhD. But I realized at 25 that I had to pull up my socks and I had to earn some money. So I went after my master's, talked to my prof. He said, yeah, and go ahead and do some work, get some experience, and then you can come back. And just didn't happen after that. Life kind of just rolled, and one thing led to another. My parents were coming over, then and I had to basically provide for them. I've done things backwards in my life all the time. So usually it's parents that bring kids over, but I brought my parents over, etc., etc. But I didn't let go of the thought that I wanted to do a PhD. So from 2001 onwards, I was always thinking about it, and I was always saying to myself, how can I work this into my life? And that's again now throwing my work-life balance off, because at 2018 I actually started my PhD part-time, which is happening at a very slow pace, but it is happening right now. So it took me about 16, 17 years. I got married about 4 years ago. I've had kids now. But I just didn't give up on the thought that I wouldn't do it. Okay, so that's one example. But there may be situations in life where, let's say you're in high school and you think, okay, well, I'm good at physics and maths, and I'm not going to become a doctor because my biology and chemistry are not good. But then as time progresses, you find that perhaps your initial assessment was not right. Now, if you become stubborn at that stage and say, no, I'm going to go in this direction, when there is clear indication that maybe your first instinct was incorrect, and you are actually rather good at biology and chemistry and maybe math as well, but and you can develop some passion there. Maybe going into medicine or some other field is not a bad thing. Now, you cannot get hung up on, no, I do just want to become an engineer. Right, similar things with other ventures where, for example, setting up a firm or whatever. You've gotta see how things are going. You cannot give up on the first sort of hurdle that comes along. Raj has set up a firm and a very successful one at that, and he and I have talked about a lot of the things, and 90 plus times out of the 100 the door gets slammed in your face. And maybe Ari understands baseball a little bit better because he lives in the US. So, if I give you, as I was saying there, a champion hitter is only hitting the ball 4 times out of 10. A .4 average is amazing, because baseball is a pitcher sport. Cricket is a batter sport. So, if your average is 30, maybe not great. It's 50. It's really good, but you're still not scoring a century every single time, right? So even when you're a champion, you're only succeeding maybe 20 to 30 or 40% of the times. That's like amazing success ratio. So you have to be mindful of all these things, but when the indications are clear that you need to switch your path, go around an obstacle, or just completely go in a different direction, that's not giving up on what you're trying to do. That's refining and realizing what's right for you. Okay, that's what I would say.
So in Saqib's case, he did not give up on his passion to being called a doctor. I think that's the only reason why he's doing it, because he wants to be a doctor.
I'm not there yet. I'll
call you doctor.
I won't give up on it. I know I'll do it somehow.
But what he did was he sort of like put that on the back burner, attended to more important things at that point, and he came back to it, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. So Arbaz, do you have a current situation where you feel like, like you've gone too far? Sometimes you start feeling like, okay, I'm just persisting a bit too much and it's not quite working out. Is that from your life experience, or you just came up with a general question?
It was actually a general question, but when I was deciding my career, actually my parents, actually my whole family is a doctors. So my father, mother, brother, sister, everyone a doctor except me. That was a critical stage where I thought I should go to engineering. Rather choosing MBBS. So that was the issue there when long back. Still, I regret that a few times, because I get a lot of support from them, and I also learned a lot of medicine names, and I can really open a I can really open a general store and then start my business here.
Sakib just demonstrated to you that even engineers want to become doctors. So you should have become a doctor in the first place.
No, I think you've done the right thing, because if you did not have the passion, you'd be miserable. You'd be not a good doctor. Whereas now you can become a really good engineer over time if you hone your skills and you keep going with your passion. That's where you're gonna grow. Some things are not for us. For me, it was very clear that I wanted to run to the hills when it came to biology and chemistry and all of that stuff. So I was rather good at math and physics, so it was pretty clear for me. And my family had lots of engineering examples going back to even to the previous generations, like 2 generations back in the 50s and 60s. So here I am,
I don't think you're empathizing enough with our boss, because I think I can empathize with your boss, because and my in-laws, right? And right now the same discussion is happening with my boys, 15 and 13. That's how old they are, with what their futures are going to be, and especially the older one is very curious, and he's surrounded by doctors, because my father-in-law, mother-in-law, my brother-in-law, they're all either doctors, and my brother-in-law is a dentist, right? And I do find that it's not blatant, but I think doctors do hold a bit of a higher sort of that we're the higher profession. You know what I'm saying? Like they throw the compensation card. You're gonna make more if you're a doctor.
Yeah.
Right? You're gonna be respected more if you're a doctor. That sort of thing. So, but that's sort of like sort of behind the scenes, just a bit of a smell that way, right? But overall, I can understand where Arbaz is coming from. So
yeah.
Are they making you feel a bit inferior, Arbaz, with your choices?
Not exactly, but I feel a few times like that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, I think it's at the end of the day, it's all about what you're good at, and
or what you want to become good at.
What you want to become, right?
Yeah.
So, and we completely forgot the second part of your question, or there's a second question.
He was asking you about the market, India versus Canada.
Oh.
Actually, I was in a process of applying for the PR. So I just want to know. I'm curious to know about the market there.
Well, again, that's a very general question. I think you got to be a bit more specific. I'm assuming you're talking in terms of opportunities for an engineer in the world of bridges, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's with regard to bridges.
Sorry for interrupting. If we make his question a little broader, not only to bridges, to general structures, for earthquake, seismic site, to general structure, even it's building or bridges or any structures.
Yeah, that makes it even more challenging to answer.
Well, I'll give
if you make it more general.
Raj, go ahead first, and I have. I'll do it. Yeah.
I think opportunities exist in both the countries, right? There's lots of opportunities in India. India, as we know, is an emerging market. It's a huge market, by the way. There's more than 1 billion people there, and as you know, there's a lot of construction happening. We've taken advantage of the Indian market with my previous firm, Infinity Engineering. That is now McElhaney, that group. I had pretty much built that firm, I would say, partly or a big part of that was projects in India, long span bridges. We worked on 3 or 4 long span bridges over a decade period, which is pretty good. So the Basoli Bridge, the Ganga River Bridge near Ara Chapra, which is known as the Veer Kunwar Setu, and there's a couple of others, right? So I think there's tons of opportunities in India. In contrast, I feel that in North America, a lot of the infrastructure has been built already, right? And so in terms of just how many situations there are to bridge, there is more bridgeable situations in India compared to North America. So what I was finding is that more lately, for every long span bridge that got announced in North America, there was probably 5 bridges that were being announced in India. So a ratio of like 1:5. So there is more opportunities. At the same time, you've got a lot bigger population also, right? So there's more competition as far as that is concerned. So the other thing that I found was that because there was such a spike sudden spike in infrastructure growth over there in India. I would say over the last 10, 15 years, many engineering outfits and construction outfits came up very quickly. And so if you look at the type of experience as a young engineer that you get over there, it's not very prolonged or sustained. I saw a lot of people with just, an average of like a year that they spend at a company, and then they're off to another company. So there was a lot of like interchange of, just because there was so much opportunity also and so many newer companies coming up, engineers were just running from one place to the other because they were getting, 15, 20% more money at the other place. And so it didn't seem like they were getting consistent mentoring, or perhaps there wasn't even any time to mentor people properly. So I think that's a bit of a challenge over there because things are happening so quickly. Whereas contrasting that with North America, I think if you were to work over here, you would get better mentorship because you'd be working with generally with engineers and with companies that have matured over time, right? They've been around for a while, and things aren't in flux or changing as rapidly as they would be in India. So I think that would be better here. Now, to get into the market, because it is a smaller market, you are competing against first the local crop of candidates, right? The first preference would be given to somebody who's graduated from an American or a Canadian school, right? And then only after that, you would have opportunities from people from other parts of the world, right? So I think in that sense, opportunity is limited. But I think if you do want to enter the market in North America, I think the best channel would be to perhaps get an education. Get, let's say, I don't know if you've done a master's already or Buzz, but perhaps you could join a master's program, and then that way you get attuned to the culture also a little bit when you go to university over here. And then coming out of that, I think employers are more open to candidates from overseas as opposed to hiring them directly. Right.
Yeah. So
general response, but we can chat offline at some other point when you've got specific situations. Then I could maybe give you some specific guidance.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just to answer a little bit of Usman's question, I think there is definitely opportunity here in both the bridges and the buildings. In Vancouver, the high-rise market seems to be pretty hot. I've got a few friends who are in the buildings industry. And they're always building. There's, and especially being on the West Coast, here in Vancouver, for sure, seismic analysis and design is the backbone of our engineering when it comes to structural engineering, whether it be bridges or buildings. So the building industry, I think, is pretty strong. It's there are opportunities, but I was going to say the same thing for people that are wanting to come from overseas, that if you get a master's degree from a Canadian or a US university, you're going to be looked upon much more favorably. I've only seen a very, very few examples in my 20 years where people from other parts of the world, even from Europe, are able to get a job right away. I've had people who've done masters from the UK and other places, and it's still a little bit hard for them to break into the market here. Whereas if you have a North American university, doesn't matter Canadian or US, employers do tend to look upon you more favorably. For better or worse, that's just how it is, and I think we should face reality that that's what it is. It does give you, as Raj was telling you, it does orient you towards sort of the working culture around here, going to a university here, and I think that's what the employers are looking for you to have a basic sort of understanding. Ari, you're from South America, and did you do some part of your education here, or did you get a job while you were back there? I'm just curious to know what your experience has been.
Well, I originally came from Mexico when I was really young,
Okay.
like 9, and so I attended high school and then college, and then yeah. So I did everything.
So you basically grew up here, so that's
Yeah.
that's a bit different. Yeah. Okay.
But I mean, I did meet a lot of people international people, especially from when I went back to do my master's. I met a lot of people from especially India, Nepal, in Nepal.
Right.
And then so I kind of I think a lot of them were able to get jobs here. Because they came out to the States to study, and I think most of them were able to find a job afterwards.
Yeah. And that's the same route that both me and Sakib also took. I went to the US to get a master's, and then after that, ended up getting a job. And that's the same thing with Sakib also. He came here to get a master's with UBC, and then got into the...
I wasn't even sure if I was going to stay. I just came as an international student. Who knew at that point, what was going to transpire? My thought was I'd probably go to the Middle East or go back or whatever, but I was also open to other countries like Canada, the US, Australia, because having grown up where we grew up, English is part of the culture, and it's just easy for us to assimilate because the language we already know. Whereas going to Germany, for example, for me, German engineering is great. It's known all over the world, but I would have had to learn the language. I am interested in languages, but English is just something that if you go to a professional stream, everything is in English in our part of the world. So that's just. So hopefully that answered the question a bit for you, Usman, and others. He's on mute.
Yes. Okay. I was quite satisfied with the answer. You gave a very deep and realistic experience. So what is happening over here, and what is happening over there, and what should we prepare for?
Well, any other questions, guys? We're here, but if people
I think we planned 4 more sessions where we want to be face to face with our community and talk to you guys one on one. So don't think that this is the last opportunity. I understand back in the subcontinent it's getting late, and you might have to attend to work too. But any final questions we can answer? Otherwise, we can close and we will chat again. So it's up to you guys.
Yeah, looks like everybody's good for now. Well,
Okay.
Thank you, everybody, for taking
Thank you very much for your time.
And
I am sorry for interrupting. I'm highly thankful to respected Raj Singh and Sir Sakib, to you, that you took the time for us. So you basically taking a time for us, holding a session which is motivating us. In the same time, you could have done other thing for your own very self. You might have given that time to your own firm, or you were earning money, but you are making us inspire a younger generation, sir. Thank you to both of you. So you gave out the time, sir, and I am looking ahead for more sessions like that, which keep us motivating.
Thank you so much, Usman. That certainly feels good, and we really enjoy this, and we think that we didn't get this sort of thing when we were at your age. So I think it's just a good thing that perhaps when you look back 20 years down the line, then you could also pass it along, sort of thing, right?
And as I say, this is a two-way street. So it's not that you're learning from us; we're also learning from you. So it's always a two-way street. So we all gain from each other, and
it is a two-way street.
Help each other out. So.
Okay, guys. Thanks
for joining, guys.
Have a
Thanks, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.